My name is Marcus Hartwell, and at 52, I thought I had learned everything there was to know about the geography of loss. 8 months ago, the cartographers of cancer had redrawn my world, carving out its vibrant heart and leaving a barren, hollow continent where my wife, Sarah, used to be. The house we had filled with laughter now echoed with a silence so profound it felt like a physical weight, pressing down on me in the quiet hours of the night. All I had left of her was a garden she had adored, and a single sacred promise whispered in the final moments of her life. In that sterile, antiseptic-scented hospital room, a place where hope goes to die, she gripped my hand with a strength that belied her failing body. Her voice, once so full of life and wit, was now a fragile, reedy whisper, a thread of sound against the incessant, indifferent hum of medical machinery. "Restore grandmother's garden, Marcus," she pleaded, her eyes, clouded with pain but still, fiercely intelligent, searching mine for an assurance I wasn't sure I could give. "Promise me. My ashes. I want them there. I want them mixed with the soil where love grew for generations." I promised, the word catching in my throat, a vow sealed in the face of oblivion. It was the last full sentence she ever spoke to me. That garden wasn't just a plot of land with flowers. It was the living soul of our home, a verdant legacy passed down from my grandmother, Rosalind. For Sarah, a botanist by passion if not by profession, it was a sanctuary, a laboratory, a canvas. For me, in the months that followed her passing, it became a living tombstone, a hallowed ground where I could still feel her presence in the heady scent of the heritage roses she'd so lovingly researched and planted. 8 months after I laid her to rest among those roses, that sacred ground became a battleground. Delilah Thornfield, our HOA president and the self-appointed queen of our quiet suburban street, stood at my door. Her manicured nails, the color of dried blood, drummed an impatient, predatory rhythm against the doorframe. "Dead people don't need gardens, Marcus," she snarled, her voice a sharp, grating sound that stripped away the thin, saccharine veil of sympathy she'd worn at the funeral. "It's time to face reality. Let go. Sell." What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly comprehend, was that Sarah's cremated remains were already intimately woven into the lifeblood of that garden, nurturing the roots of the very roses she now deemed an eyesore. What she failed to realize was that this wasn't just about a garden anymore. It was about protecting my wife's grave from a vulture circling overhead. Delilah's war against me, I would soon discover, had not begun with Sarah's death. It had been brewing for 8 long, bitter years, ever since Sarah inherited this house in a will contest. Delilah, a distant, grasping relative, had seen the property not as a family home, but as a prime piece of real estate ripe for development. She had seen dollar signs where we saw a lifetime of memories. Behind her perfectly coiffed hair and forced, neighborly smiles, Delilah ran a shadow empire. Her LLC, a faceless entity buried under layers of impenetrable legal paperwork, had been systematically and ruthlessly targeting our street's original, elderly homeowners. Eleanor Vance, the sweet, gentle widow next door, recounted over tea how Delilah had graciously helped her transition to an assisted living facility after a sudden, inexplicable spike in HOA citations for violations that had never existed before. Frank Morrison, a combat veteran who found a fragile piece tending his own garden, had sold his house for a fraction of its market value after a campaign of harassment involving mysterious utility shutoffs and surprise tax reassessments made. His life a living hell. The pattern was as brilliant as it was cruel. Identify a vulnerable target, manufacture a crisis through a barrage of violations, create unbearable financial and emotional pressure, and then swoop in with a predatory, below-market rescue offer through one of her anonymous shell companies. Sarah's death was not a tragedy to Delilah. It was her golden opportunity. The day after the funeral, while I was still adrift in a fog of raw, disorienting grief, she appeared at my door. She was a vision of performative sorrow, her voice dripping with fake sympathy, her cold, calculating eyes scanning my home, assessing its value. The psychological warfare began subtly, a campaign of whispers and innuendo. Anonymous calls to adult protective services, concerned about my mental state. Quiet, staged conversations with neighbors about my unhealthy attachment to a dead woman, painting my profound grief as a dangerous instability. Then came the physical attacks, each one a calculated strike at the heart of Sarah's memory. The heritage roses, irreplaceable specimens she had spent years researching and cultivating for her memorial, withered and died almost overnight. The cause? An accidental and tragically potent herbicide overspray during a community beautification project that Delilah had personally overseen. Standing in that poisoned, dying garden, touching the brown, brittle edges of petals that had bloomed in vibrant tribute to Sarah just weeks before, I felt something inside my chest crack and splinter. This wasn't just petty vandalism. It was a calculated act of desecration. The official HOA fine for the ugly, dying, and non-compliant garden arrived with a note of surgical cruelty. The fine was a staggering $5,000, and the deadline for payment was set for exactly 1 month from that day, the 1-year anniversary of Sarah's passing. She wasn't just trying to take my house. She was methodically, sadistically, trying to break my spirit. But as I knelt in that damaged garden, breathing in the lingering scent of Sarah's lavender and the faint, sweet perfume of the dying roses, I found something she could never touch, something she had never counted on. Tucked away in the secret compartment of my grandmother's antique jewelry box, I found a hidden set of Sarah's research notes. My brilliant, far-sighted wife, even while battling the ravages of cancer, had sensed the predator circling our home. Marcus, her final note read, her elegant, familiar handwriting a ghost on the yellowed page. If you're reading this, Delilah is making her move. The garden preservation requirement in your grandmother's will isn't just sentimental. It's our legal protection. There's a trust fund, a substantial one, $750,000, tied directly to the garden. It can fund a legal defense, but only if you keep the memorial intact. Don't let her steal what 3 generations of our family built with love. The words hit me like a splash of ice water, shocking me out of my grief-induced haze. Sarah had left me more than a promise. She had left me a strategy, a war chest, and a plan. The game had changed. This was no longer about a grieving husband protecting a sentimental garden. It was about a man armed with the truth, ready to defend, a fortress that his brilliant wife had fortified from beyond the grave. The predator was about to discover that she had awakened prey that refused to be hunted. Delilah's fatal mistake was in underestimating the potent alchemy of grief and purpose. Armed with Sarah's posthumous guidance, my fight began not with outbursts of anger, but with the cold, methodical precision of a detective building a case. My first call was to Helen Martinez, the city's elderly, semi-retired archivist, a woman with a passion for local history and a memory like a steel trap. "Marcus," she said, her voice crackling with the kind of infectious excitement that only a true historian can muster. "I've been researching your property's history after hearing about the disputes from a friend at City Hall. You need to see what I found. Your grandmother Rosalind wasn't just a gardener. She was the town's first accredited female botanist. That garden of hers, the one Delilah is so keen on destroying, contains original, documented specimens from the town founder's 1887 estate. Some of those plants, Marcus, might be genetically unique, irreplaceable links to our city's agricultural heritage." The revelation was a lightning strike, illuminating the dark landscape of Delilah's scheme. The legal protection Sarah had hinted at was real, tangible, and more powerful than I had ever imagined. This wasn't just a sentimental garden, it was a living, breathing piece of history. But before I could fully comprehend the implications of this discovery, Delilah escalated her attack to a level of personal cruelty that I could never have anticipated. She hired an arsonist. At 2:47 a.m. on a moonless, starless night, the state-of-the-art, motion-activated security cameras I had installed around the perimeter of the garden captured every damning moment in crystal-clear, high-definition clarity. A man named Tommy the Torch Martinez, a known local criminal with a taste for insurance, Jobs crept into my backyard, carrying a can of accelerant and a box of matches. His mission, as was later revealed on a federal wiretap of Delilah's phone, was explicit and chilling. Make it look accidental, but make sure everything burns. The memorial, the plants, the soil, everything that gives that bastard his legal protection. But Delilah's criminal empire, built on a foundation of lies and intimidation, was already crumbling. The FBI, alerted by a private investigator I had hired to look into her fraudulent property acquisitions, was already watching her every move. Through my bedroom window, a vantage point from which I had so often watched Sarah tend her roses, I now watched as the infrared laser sights of federal agents danced across the arsonist's chest. He never got the chance to light the match. Federal agents, materializing from the shadows like avenging angels, swarmed him, tackling him to the ground just feet from Sarah's memorial stone. The attempted arson charge was quickly and dramatically escalated to attempted murder when investigators discovered that he had also tampered with our home's main gas line. The game was over, but the final public checkmate was yet to be played. The ground-penetrating radar, brought in as part of the now sprawling federal investigation, arrived a week later. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a renowned archaeologist, was meticulously scanning the garden when she suddenly froze, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Marcus, stop everything," she whispered, her voice shaking with an excitement that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath our feet. The radar screen in her hands showed unmistakable geometric patterns buried 3 feet beneath Sarah's favorite roses. "These are foundation ruins," she breathed, her voice filled with awe. "Your memorial garden sits directly on top of the original 1887 town founder's homestead. This isn't just historically significant, Marcus. It's archaeologically priceless. Federal law automatically and immediately protects such sites. Every HOA action, every manufactured fine, every baseless threat Delilah had ever made against me became instantly, irrevocably null and void. My property transformed overnight into a controlled archaeological zone, cordoned off with yellow police tape that fluttered like triumphant prayer flags around the perimeter of Sarah's memorial." The final public showdown was not in a courtroom, but at a town hall meeting packed with over 800 people, national news crews, and a phalanx of grim-faced federal agents. Delilah, stripped of her designer clothes and her smug sense of superiority, was escorted in wearing a standard-issue orange jumpsuit, her wrists bound by gleaming federal handcuffs. The U.S. attorney, a woman with a voice like polished steel, laid out the charges for the assembled crowd. A multi-million-dollar property fraud conspiracy, a pattern of systemic elderly abuse, bribery, wire fraud, and now, interference with a federally protected archaeological site. Dr. Rodriguez then took the stage, her voice trembling with scientific passion, as she explained that the unique mineral content of Sarah's cremated remains had created perfect preservation conditions for dormant, 140-year-old seeds and even ancient human DNA, turning her grave into a biological time capsule of incalculable scientific value. When it was my turn to speak, I read Sarah's final prophetic letter aloud, her words echoing through the silent, cavernous auditorium. Her love, her foresight, her unwavering belief in the sanctity of our home had not just preserved a garden, it had preserved history itself. The sentencing was swift and severe. Delilah received 27 years in a federal prison, with no possibility of parole. Her co-conspirators, a network of corrupt officials and predatory real estate agents, faced decades of their own. Her entire criminal enterprise was dismantled, with over $50 million in seized assets used to compensate the elderly homeowners whose lives she had systematically destroyed. 6 months later, I stood in the Sarah Hartwell Memorial Garden. It was no longer just a private garden. It was a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a world-renowned research center, and a place of profound healing and remembrance. Children from local schools planted heritage seeds in the very soil where an arsonist had once stood, ready to turn it all to ash. Scientists from around the globe studied biological specimens that would help fight climate change and preserve biodiversity. And I, the garden's director, had found a new, unexpected purpose in my life. Love, it turns out, really does grow eternal roots. And sometimes, if you tend them with enough care and determination, those roots are strong enough to bring an entire empire of greed and cruelty crashing to the ground. If you were moved by this story of love, loss, and ultimate justice, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to Drama Lady Files for more incredible tales of right triumphing over wrong. And now for our question. What do you believe is the most powerful way to honor a loved one's memory? Let us know in the comments below.